Hi, my name is Prinesan Mudli and I'm the Deputy Registrar of the National Consumer Tribunal. In the last few videos, we spent quite a bit of time going through filing requirements of different types of applications that can be filed. But once these applications are filed, the question is what happens next? So today's video is going to touch on pleadings, it's going to touch on answering affidavit, replying affidavit, as well as interlocutories. I urge you, however, to listen to the advice that I'm giving in line with the information behind me on the presentation, as I won't be strictly adhering to the exact wording there, but rather spending time explaining each point to you. Before we get into what the very complex question of what are pleadings, it's nice to have an overview of the tribunal processes. The tribunal processes generally kick off where an application is filed by way of filing, the meeting of filing requirements. All these filing requirements are located in the tribunal rules. These rules and these requirements are what we've spent time previously in discussing the different types of filing requirements met to file an application at the tribunal. But once the application is filed, a notice of filing is issued. That really kicks off pleadings. Pleadings generally come in the form of an answering affidavit and a replying affidavit before the matter is set down and heard. It's important to understand, though, that when filing an answering affidavit, that full detail needs to be included in, as well as within your replying affidavit. The reason is because adjudication takes place based on the papers before the tribunal. However, parties are still given an opportunity to present their case at the final hearing. Whilst there's various types of pleadings and applications that can be filed at the tribunal, I'm really focusing on answering and replying affidavits. Basically, answering affidavits is regulated by Rule 13, which we're going to touch on just now. And the main purpose of an answering affidavit is to answer to the application filed. So once you have the application that's filed, it's answering to the points that have been raised in the application papers. In courts, generally, you look at answering to the founding papers. This is answering to the application papers that are filed with the tribunal. A reply is simply being able to reply to the answer. When replying to the answer, the focus is on what new information has come out in the answering affidavit that needs to be responded to. And that's the basis of your replying affidavit. Timelines, however, differ slightly, which we'll touch on just now, especially when it comes to urgent applications. The next two slides are going to deal with the answering affidavit, which, as I mentioned before, is in terms of Rule 13. Now, an answering affidavit is, again, to oppose an application or referral. You serve your answering affidavit. You serve your answering affidavit on the other parties to the matter, and then you file it with the tribunal. When it comes to an answering affidavit, the question is how long do you have to file an answering affidavit? And the answer is generally 15 days. I say generally because there is an exception. The exception lies within the urgent applications that are filed with the tribunal, which allows for 10 days to file the answering affidavit. However, that also can be shortened and dictated by the registrar of the tribunal. In general, we tend to use 7 days as a benchmark for how long to file your answering affidavit, how long you have to file your answering affidavit in an urgent matter. Other than that, the answering affidavit, again, 15 days, answer to the allegations put forward, and you're also entitled to bring in new information. In the next slide, we're going to touch a little bit more on the answering affidavit. So the next bit of information is what exactly needs to be contained in an answering affidavit. And well, item 4 in the presentation behind me provides quite an accurate description of exactly what needs to be in it. My focus, however, is going to be on if something's not in it. So for example, if you look at an answering affidavit that you're answering and responding to each and every allegation put forward in the application papers, the problem arises is where you don't address a certain allegation because it's taken as being admitted. Whereas if you did address it, it could be taken as being denied or understood or explained. That's a big difference. So when filing an answering affidavit, it is important that each and every allegation put forward by the applicant's papers are answered in your answering affidavit. And those that are not, you understand and accept that those items are going to be accepted as being admitted. As I mentioned earlier, after an answer is a replying affidavit. A replying affidavit is filed again as a response to the allegations that come across in the answering affidavit. Generally, the focus is on new information that's been raised in the answering affidavit that needs to be addressed in the replying affidavit. Basically, you need to look at the answering affidavit and decide whether you want to admit or deny each and every allegation put forward in the answering affidavit. It deals with position of law, it deals with position of fact, but in essence, what this answering and replying affidavit is seeking to do is try and limit the issues for the tribunal to be able to adjudicate on those that need adjudicating. Okay, the next aspect about the replying affidavit that's important is how you need to file it, what and how you need to file it. So basically, when you're done with the replying affidavit, you need to serve it on the other parties to the matter, and then you need to file it with the tribunal. When the tribunal looks at your replying affidavit, and this stands true for answering affidavits as well, we have to make sure that service is done in line with the rules. Once service is done in line with the rules, we accept the replying affidavit and we'll send out an email confirming the replying affidavit has been accepted. Just behind me is some details on what exactly needs to be in there. A covering sheet just basically explaining the document that I'm filing is the replying affidavit. The proof of service needs to be there. So if you served it, and this again is true for answering as well, if you serve by way of registered mail, you need to put the registered mail slip there. If it's via email, you need to provide the consent to service and the service of the documents. When it comes to the new issues that's raised again in the replying affidavit, the idea is that you shouldn't be raising new issues at the replying affidavit. You need to be responding to those in the answering affidavit. If you find you need to respond or add something new, you're most welcome to contact our office, and then we can guide you through the possibility of filing supplementary affidavits. Now we've done answering, we've done replying. I want to touch on interlocutories. Interlocutory applications, as it sounds, is something that interlocks. It's basically best seen as a case within a case. So if something needs to be dealt with before the finalization of the matter, interlocutory applications come into play. With an interlocutory application, we need the adjudication output of that before we know the way forward to go. There's various examples of interlocutories. There's, for example, condemnations. There's Rule 15 amendments to papers. There's supplementary affidavits. There's various types of interlocutories. But all of it have something in common. It's a case within a case. And when I say case within a case, I mean it has its own set of pleadings. It has its own set of answering and replying affidavits. Now remember, it's not necessary. If there's no answering affidavit that's filed, it's just looked at by the tribunal as an unopposed matter. But once it's answering and replying is filed, it's looked at as an opposed matter. The interlocutory application seems to clarify some of the stuff that needs to be in the case, add certain stuff that may have been omitted, or deal with certain non-compliance issues, for example, where you didn't comply fully with the rules that needs to be complied with. So I have given you some examples of interlocutory applications, but just to reiterate, condemnation. Condemnation can be for various reasons. I'm going to use the most common one. It's the late filing. So say, for example, you need to file an answering affidavit. You had, as I've mentioned before, 15 days to file it. So you're only ready and able to file it on day 18. Now, we can't just get rid of your answering affidavit and say there's nothing you can do, because we subscribe to principles of natural justice. One of the Latin terms or phrases used quite often is audi altrum partem. Basically, it means both sides must be given a chance to be heard. So when it comes to late filing or a late answering affidavit, you're allowed to apply for a condemnation. Say, for example, you applied for the condemnation. You follow the requirements in terms of our tribunal rules and you've applied for it, you've got a notice of filing. The other party can file an answering affidavit specifically to the condemnation, and you can then file a replying affidavit to that answering affidavit on the condemnation. This triggers adjudication. Adjudication, once if it's granted, it allows your original answering affidavit to be condoned, and within that period of time, it then reopens the pleadings for the main matter and allows for a 10-day period, as we've discussed before, for the filing of a replying affidavit. So that's a nice, very simple to understand explanation on how these work and how you reopen and close pleadings as things happen. Going forward though, if you have different types of interlocutory applications that you want to file, and as I've mentioned, there are many, you're most welcome again to contact our offices and we can just guide you through what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Okay, so we've been going on and on, or I've been going on and on about answering affidavit 15 days, replying affidavit 10 days, maybe a 7-day, but what exactly is 7 days? What exactly is 10 and 15 days? Well, we count as business days. Business days excludes the weekends, it excludes public holidays, it excludes our office closure. When counting your 15 days, please count in this way. This is the way you need to count it. If you file today, if you file an answering affidavit today, the first day in which you need to count for the replying affidavit's due date is the next day. So you start day one on the day after the filing. You include day 10, which is the last day within the 10 days. That is the period in which the 10 days the 10 days work. So when you're dealing with your answering affidavit and replying affidavit, have an idea on how we count it, because this is how you would need to structure yourself when planning for filing your answering and replying affidavit. Again, if you're late, it's not a train smash. You are entitled to file a condemnation. We will discuss condemnations at a later stage, but basically for a condemnation, you need to explain, especially for late filing, degree of lateness and the possibilities of success, prospects of success, and the importance of the matter to you. So just ensure that you're dealing with these things as you understanding pleadings. Okay, service is critical to the tribunal. I spoke about odi altrum partem. I told you that both sides must be given a fair opportunity to speak. And basically what that means, or why service is critical, is because service ensures or gives the tribunal the satisfaction that the other party had known about this case, especially if they chose not to defend it. So service is probably one of the most important things on preserving natural justice. Now, when we're looking at service, we need to understand where it comes from. Service is bound by Rule 30 of the Tribunal Rules. It tells you the type of services that can be done. We can accept service. Service can be done via email, provided consent to service is done. It could be done via registered mail. It can be done via physical delivery. Even we look at couriers as an element of physical delivery as well. It can be done by fax. There's various ways of serving. But there's a couple of things that I've noticed that tend to have issues when it comes to service, and I just want to alert you to that. So sometimes personal service is done and you take the document and you go to the respondent's place and someone just signs on it. We're looking to find out who signed on it. Did a person sign for it? So it's important that that person puts their name in. They need to put their designation in. They need to put the date in which they received it. All of this is important elements of service. When it comes to email or even fax service, consent to service is critical, because we want to know that the email address that you use is an email address that that party had said, yes, you can use. The reason for it is to ensure that the documents have arrived at the place it should arrive at. Registered mail is probably the easiest way, because it's just going to the post office and sending it via registered mail. There's slight challenges with regards to registered mail in general, and I'll tell you how we deal with it internally. Now, the problem with registered mail is that once it's sent out, it's not immediate that the person receives it. Quite often, the other party might receive it within after 15 days, which forces a condemnation process. So we use the date of first notification once provided, if provided by the respondent, is the new date of receipt of the application. So although you may have sent it on a certain day, we'd record it on that day. But if for date of first notification is provided to us, we use that date as the date of application receipt. But should those service avenues not be available to you, it might not always be available to you. There might be instances where the person's moved overseas that you're trying to reach, or you don't know where the person is based. Please contact us for guidance on other service mechanisms, because there is different types of service options that's available under those circumstances.